Okay, we're going to get started. Thank you all for joining and welcome to today's webinar on the 2024 Retailer Report Card. The title of today's webinar is What Retailers, Policymakers, and Brands Need to Know, Insights from the Retailer Report Card on Trends, Policies, and Best Practices. My name is Mike Shade. I'm the director of the Mind the Store program for Toxic Free Future, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Joining me is my colleague, Sherry Peel, who is the Director of Markets and Regulatory Policy. Both of us are the co-authors of the report card, and we'll be walking through high-level summary of the background on the scorecard, key findings, and recommendations. A little bit of background on myself. I've been working on environmental health policy and environmental justice at the state and the national level for more than 20 years, and I've been leading the Mind the Store program for Toxic Free Future since for the past 11 years, since 2014. Sherry Peel is as I noted, the Director of Markets and Regulatory Policy here at TFF, co-author of the report card. She is engaged in a lot of our marketplace transformation work and also is engaged in a lot of our regulatory policy work, particularly at the state level in Washington State. Sherry previously worked at Clean Production Action, where she coordinated the Chemical Footprint Project and has been working for decades on environmental health policy. Couple of housekeeping items before we dive in here. All webinar participants should be muted. And if you have any questions during the webinar, you could type in any questions in the Q&A section in the Zoom feature. The names of those asking questions should not be shared publicly, just so you know, so I don't think you need to worry about that. Please don't use the chat, but if you have any other questions, feel free to type them in the chat. Logistics. I will note that the webinar is being recorded, including the Q&A, and we will be sharing a copy of these slides as well as a recording via email in the next day or so. We'll also be putting that up on our website as well. So on today's webinar, we're going to be highlighting the background, findings, and recommendations from the 2024 Retail Report Card. So we'll kick it off with a little bit of background, purpose behind why we published this report. And then we'll dive into the criteria behind this year's scorecard, what we're calling the 4 essential elements for a safer marketplace, which we believe represent best-in-class approaches to addressing chemicals and plastics of high concern. From there, we'll walk through key findings and trends from this year's scorecard. And then finally, we will go over recommendations and next steps. There will be time for Q&A at the end of the webinar. So if folks have any questions, again, please put that in the Q&A section, or if you have any more general questions, you can put them in the chat. So a little bit of background. The Retail Report Card is published by the Mind the Store program of Toxic Free Future. For those of you that may not be familiar, we are a national environmental health research and advocacy organization. We've been around for over 40 years. We're headquartered in Washington State. We have offices around the country, California, DC, here in New York, where I'm based. Core to our work is scientific research. We publish independent reports and research studies on chemicals of concern. For example, we've done a lot of research in recent years into PFAS in products such as food packaging and textiles. We also engage in policy advocacy at the state and the federal level. I've been doing a lot of work in recent years to implement the Safer Products for Washington program in Washington State, and federally focused on implementing TSCA reform, implementation of the Toxic Substances Control Act. So as I noted, the Retail Report Card is a project of our Mind the Store program, which is a national campaign that we launched back in 2013 to challenge and encourage the nation's largest retailers to reduce and eliminate dangerous chemicals and plastics. We believe that retailers can really play an important role in safeguarding public health by engaging their suppliers to reduce and eliminate harmful chemicals and plastics, and increase transparency of ingredients and products, and transform the marketplace to safer solutions. A little bit of background on kind of how we address chemicals organizationally. We tend to take a hazard-based approach to chemicals management. We believe the best way to protect consumers, communities, and workers from chemicals is to take a hazard-based approach. And in our advocacy and in our policy engagement, we focus on chemicals of high concern that have been identified by authoritative bodies and other researchers around the world. A little bit of criteria behind the chemicals for how we define a high hazard chemical. We focus on chemicals that are categorized as carcinogens, mutagens, or reproductive toxicants, also known as CMRs. We also focus on chemicals that are referred to as persistent, bioaccumulative, or toxic. In other words, chemicals that can persist in the environment, such as PFAS, or build up in our bodies in the food chain, such as organohalogen flame retardants, and those that are also toxic. We're also very concerned about chemicals of equivalent concern, particularly chemicals that are endocrine or hormone disrupting chemicals, substances that can be dangerous at even very low levels of exposure. And we're also focused on chemicals that may break down into any one of the above. This approach to focus on high hazard chemicals is very much aligned with governmental and corporate policies and certifications around the world, from the Safer Products for Washington law in Washington state to the European Union REACH legislation identifying substances of very high concern to programs such as EPA Safer Choice and chemical hazard assessment methodologies such as Green Screen and Chem Forward, which have identified high hazard chemicals as Green Screen Benchmark 1 or Chem Forward hazard bands D and F. So there's a lot of reason why we're concerned about chemicals and plastics that can be found in consumer products and packaging. In recent years, I would say over the last 20, 30 years, there's a growing body of scientific evidence that has linked exposure to certain chemicals to an increased incidence of chronic diseases that are on the rise in our society. In fact, public health officials just published a major review article in the New England Journal of Medicine that did a really good job of highlighting increasing concern with chemical exposure and links to chronic health problems on the rise, such as diseases such as breast cancer, childhood brain cancer, learning developmental disabilities, reproductive challenges such as infertility, respiratory challenges such as asthma. One example of why we're concerned about chemical exposure is there's a growing body of evidence that has shown that certain chemicals can build up in our bodies and in fact contaminate women's breast milk. Now, to be clear, breast milk is still considered the best food for babies. We do not encourage consumers to stop breastfeeding. However, the fact that what is considered to be the most precious food on the planet and which should be pure, unfortunately, has been found to be contaminated with some of the most persistent toxic chemicals on the planet. Organizationally, we've been researching this since for a number of years now. In 2019, we worked with scientists at universities to collect samples of breast milk from women in the greater Seattle area to identify whether or not women's breast milk was contaminated with emerging chemicals of concern, such as PFAS and flame retardants. It's worth noting that for the women whose samples we collected, these were ordinary moms who did not come from, I would say, contaminated communities. They didn't live near industrial toxic waste sites, landfills, incinerators, and other major sources of industrial pollution. So these were ordinary Americans. So after we collected the samples, working with researchers and labs, we had those breast milk samples collected for 4 key classes of emerging chemicals of concern: PFAS, organophosphate chemicals, which are often used as plasticizers and flame retardants, quaternary ammonium compounds, also known as quats, which are commonly found in household cleaning products and disinfectants, and brominated flame retardants. In over 3 to 4 year period, we published 4 different independent peer-reviewed studies in the scientific literature that documented all 4 classes of chemicals are building up in women's breast milk. In some cases, this was the first time that these chemicals have been detected in women's breast milk. So why do we share this? We share this because we think that retailers and other policymakers really must step up to protect public health, to reduce our exposure to harmful chemicals that are contaminating women's breast milk. There is a good story here, though, and that is that we know that governmental bans and corporate restrictions on chemicals can actually work to reduce human exposure to dangerous chemicals. One of the things that the research revealed is that as emerging evidence around polybrominated diphenyl ethers, also known as there are a certain class of brominated flame retardants, after these chemicals started being banned or restricted, their levels declined by 70% between 2003 and 2019 in the Pacific Northwest after governments and businesses started restricting them. So that's great. It shows that when companies and government act, we can actually reduce human exposure to highly hazard persistent chemicals. But we need to ensure that we're not substituting one bad actor chemical for another. One of the things that our research found is that industry substituted these PBDEs with other brominated flame retardants, which were also showing up in breast milk. Our study revealed for the first time ever these replacement bromophenols, which are a category of brominated flame retardants, they were found in 88% of women's breast milk that we detected. And we share this really to point out two things. One, that it's important for businesses and policymakers to take a class-based approach to chemicals management when there's emerging and growing evidence concern around a class of chemicals, such as brominated flame retardants in this case. And also, businesses need to do a much better job of avoiding regrettable substitution. That is, not substituting one chemical for another that poses similar or equivalent hazards to public health and the environment. And that's a through line you're going to hear us talk a lot about today. We know that chemicals and products sold at retail are often not chemically bound. They can escape from both formulated products and articles. Consumers can be exposed, so customers of retailers can be exposed to chemicals from products and packaging. And unfortunately, lack of ingredient disclosure often makes it challenging for customers and businesses to prevent exposure because chemicals are often not labeled on the product. And we also know that we're all often not exposed to one chemical at a time, but dozens or hundreds, we may come across dozens or hundreds of chemicals of concern in our daily habits. So we really need the business community to step up to do a much better job to protect public health. The good news, again, is that when chemicals are restricted or phased out, we can show that human exposure can decrease, but we also need to ensure that we're not moving from one bad actor chemical to another, and we must move towards known safer alternatives. And we share all this because this is really to kind of set up the conversation around the retail report card. Consumers today want to know that the products that they sell are safe and healthy. We're seeing increased market demand for products that are more transparent about ingredients and products that don't contain bad actor chemicals like phthalates and flame retardants and PFAS and other high hazard chemicals. And for those companies that are not properly managing chemicals in their supply chain, they may face growing not only reputational risks, but also regulatory, legal, and financial risks for not properly managing chemicals in their supply chain. So here at TFF, we've been publishing a retail report card since 2016 to look at how are major retailers managing these issues? How are major retailers addressing dangerous chemicals and plastics in their supply chain to mitigate these growing risks and also meet the rising consumer demand for safer and healthier products? The first scorecard was published in 2016 when we evaluated 11 major retailers, and we've steadily expanded the scorecard over time. We evaluate companies based on publicly available information, such as information published in sustainability reports, and then we grade companies against best-in-class approaches to chemicals management. By putting out this report card, there's a couple things that we're aiming to do here. We're really hoping to catalyze improvement in the marketplace. Our goal is really to highlight leaders and to reward companies that are doing a good job and to encourage laggard companies to improve over time and really to what we call to drive a competitive race to the top in the retail sector. Certainly no company wants to earn a low grade of a D or an F. And we've seen over the years how the Mind the Store program and the retail report card has really helped to catalyze improvement in the marketplace. For example, when we first launched Mind the Store in 2013, no major US retailer had a corporate chemical policy. Today, roughly half of all 50 retailers we evaluated have chemical policies in place, and many companies are working to reduce and eliminate dangerous chemicals and plastics. Before I pass the mic to my colleague, Sherry, I will also note that concern around these issues is rising. The most recent report, which we'll be talking about in a minute, got really significant media coverage, such as this article highlighted in the bottom right on CNN. In fact, there were more than 340 stories or article mentions on the report card. And in fact, there was nearly a 50% increase in media coverage on this year's report card compared to the last one published in 2021. And that has continued to increase over time. So this is a really important issue, and we're really excited to share with you the findings and the recommendations of this year's scorecard. And with that, I will pass the mic to Sherry.
Thanks, Mike. I'm going to give you a brief overview of the 2024 Retail Report Card, then go more into depth on our findings and give you a snapshot of what you can see on our website. Next slide. So the 2024 Retailer Report Card evaluated 50 of the largest retailers in the United States and Canada. The 50 refers to parent companies. You see more than 50 logos on this slide because we've included some of their subsidiaries. Two subsidiaries, Whole Foods, which is owned by Amazon, and Trader Joe's, which is owned by Aldi, were evaluated separately. Next slide. We have 4 new retailers this year: PetSmart, Sherwin-Williams, LL Flooring, and Five Below. Next slide. So if you take into account all the subsidiaries, the retailer report card covers 160 retailers, covering nearly every community in the US and Canada. We've made some changes for the 2024 version of the report card. We've updated the criteria, which I'll talk more about in a moment. As part of the evaluation, retailers earn a numerical score based on the actions they've taken. We've redistributed the points, assigning about a third of the available points to work on proven safer solutions for reasons that Mike just covered, the importance of moving to known safer alternatives. Also, recognizing that restaurants are different from home improvement stores, which are different from grocery stores, we've developed 4 tailored rubrics so that retailers wouldn't be penalized for not taking action on a question that was irrelevant to them. To communicate results quickly to the public, we also convert the numerical scores to letter grades, which are calculated using the percent of total possible points earned. So we reset the grading scale this year, not changing the percent for a failing grade, which is 9% and below, but making it more challenging to earn the higher grades. So as a result, a number of retailers saw their letter grades slipped, even though they hadn't changed their chemicals management programs. The change in grading is noted in numerous places on the website, including with each retailer's grade history. And finally, this year we developed the Ban the Bad priority list. Next slide. So the Ban the Bad priority list is a list of chemicals, chemical classes and groups, and plastics that we prioritize based on their known use in consumer products and high hazard. We define chemical classes and groups. We actually worked with Clean Production Action to do this. And we include specifically chemicals of high concern for beauty products of environmental justice concern. So these are chemicals that are used in beauty and personal care products marketed to people of color because that is such an area of concern. Next slide. As an example of why it's important to pay attention to the chemical class definitions, for PFAS, we reviewed, obviously, the restricted substances list for all 50 retailers that we looked at, and we noticed that retailers varied quite a bit with the way they defined PFAS. There was one retailer we looked at that actually wasn't in the retailer report card that had 5 different definitions for PFAS in 5 separate RSLs, or restricted substances lists, that they had developed for different product categories. Many of the definitions that were used by the retailers were not as comprehensive as the definition that's been adopted in regulation by 24 states shown here. And that is the definition, the regulatory definition here is the one that we've included in the ban the bad list. So the ban the bad list can act as a reference for retailers as a conservative approach for both regulatory compliance and protecting human health. Slide. So our rubric, which we call the 4 essential elements for a safer marketplace. Next slide. At a high level, the questions that we asked on previous report cards have been put into 4 groups, which we're calling these 4 essential elements for a safer marketplace. So the first group is corporate commitment, which asks, does a retailer have a top-down commitment to both avoid chemicals and plastics of high concern and move to safer solutions? Next is transparency, which asks, does the retailer work to get the information on the chemicals and plastics in their products from their suppliers and make sure that that information is passed on to their customers? Next, ban the bad. Are the retailers working to restrict chemicals and plastics of high concern? And finally, safer solutions. Are retailers not only restricting the known bad chemicals, but working to make sure that the products on their shelves are made without chemicals of high concern? So not using those regrettable substitutes that Mike mentioned. So you'll notice that the points increase as you move from left to right, as you move from what is least difficult to most difficult and also most important, for a total of 155 points, except for retailers that sell beauty products where they have a maximum of 165 points because we ask 4 different additional questions that address beauty products of environmental justice concern, again, because that is such an important area. And then grades, again, are calculated basis a percent of total to make it all apples to apples. Next slide. So the rubric can be seen as a roadmap to get from a statement of intent, which would be in the corporate chemicals policy, to being able to measure success by quantifying safer products on shelves. And realistically, we recognize that this never happens sequentially in the way that we've laid it out here. But these are the component pieces to get from setting that statement of intent to realizing the goal. And the goal is really, truly safer products. So our findings. These are our leaders. 7 retailers scored in the A and B range for their work to both reduce chemicals and plastics of high concern and also to advance safer solutions. So congratulations to Apple, Sephora, Target, and Walmart for scoring in the A range. And right behind them, congratulations to Whole Foods, IKEA, and Ulta Beauty for being the B range. However, first of all, I'd encourage all of you to take a look at the individual pages for these retailers to learn more about what they're doing. Because overall, the average grade for all retailers was a D+. So we've got things to learn. In spite of the changes we made to the criteria, 19 retailers improved their scores from 2021. We calculated this change again based on the percent of total points earned in 2021 versus percent of total in 2024. Ulta was the most improved, roughly doubling its score from 2021. So in addition, even with the tightened grading scale, 5 retailers improved their grades. Looking at what caused the improvements, there was no one thing that these retailers were doing or even a trend. Improvements came across all 4 elements with new safer chemicals policies, increased transparency, new restriction, and work on safer chemicals. So congratulations to all of these retailers for your increased scores and grades. On the other hand, 17 retailers earned failing grades, landing them in what we call the toxic hall of shame. Again, this means they earned 9% or less of total possible points. This includes 3 of our new retailers. So we strongly encourage these retailers to take a look at what the leaders are doing and begin to implement similar programs. Taking a look across the elements, we see that the Most improvement was made, or the highest scores occurred with corporate commitment, and the lowest in safer solutions. To some degree, these results are not a surprise. Corporate commitment is most within the control of each individual retailer. It's the easiest thing to do. Ban the bad, which is the next one. There's also often an incentive with threats of regulation or consumer demand to restrict chemicals of high concern. Whereas transparency, particularly transparency around articles as opposed to formulated products, is quite difficult, and safer solutions is where we see the most room for improvement, also the most important. So going through each one of the elements, a few highlights. The most progress, again, was with corporate commitment. Of all of the questions on the retailer report card, the one where the most retailers earned points was the question for corporate chemicals policies. Where at minimum, the retailer has committed to move away from chemicals and plastics of high concern. So there we have 56% of retailers have such a corporate chemicals policy. CVS Health and Ulta Beauty actually brought in new corporate chemicals policies in 2024. 16%, 8 of the 50 retailers participate in the Chemical Footprint Project, which, as Mike mentioned, I used to manage. It's a program of clean production action and provides a chemical footprint project survey, which gives a really detailed look. It provides a gap analysis for retailers so that they can figure out how to improve, where they are and how to improve. So retailers were either participating as signatories, where they are actually encouraging their suppliers to participate in the CFP survey, or they're participating in the CFP survey themselves. 5 retailers supported governmental policies to reduce chemicals and plastics of concern. So for example, Sephora and Walmart supported the expansion of the EPA Safer Choice program to additional product categories, particularly beauty and personal care products. Next slide. For transparency, we found that the percent of retailers that ask suppliers to disclose the chemical content of their products for retailers' internal use was 46%, and asking their suppliers to give that same information to consumers was slightly less at 44%. Particularly around formulated products. So for formulated products, think mainly gels or liquids. Retailers are usually using a third-party tool such as UL WorkSmart, where the suppliers can either can or are required by the retailer to submit full ingredient information to this tool that then the retailer can look at and evaluate. It's much more difficult actually for articles. So these are, think, generally solid products. So furniture or electronics. It's more difficult to get that information. Apple is the leader here with transparency. Apple has a full material disclosure program, which it requires its suppliers to participate in, with the goal of cataloging and mapping each chemical that's used in all Apple products. In addition, 2 companies, Walmart and Whole Foods Market, got credit for disclosing their chemical footprints this past year. Walmart became the first retailer to calculate, track, and report its chemical footprint beginning in 2017. Next slide. For Ban the Bad, this is the element that focuses on looking at the scope of chemicals and plastics restricted across product categories, what's currently restricted. It all then focuses on goals, and then it looks at progress. So here is a few highlights of the goals that retailers have set. 44% of retailers have set some sort of goal. These had to be time-bound goals over a defined product category or product categories with defined chemicals. If you go through and look at the type of goals that were set, the highest number of retailers set goals around PFAS. 30% of retailers set goals around some category of products with regard to PFAS. And And then also PVC plastic, 20% set goals around PVC plastic, either in packaging or some product category. So we know that the manufacture, in particular of PVC plastic, has been devastating for communities where that manufacturing takes place. This photo is of Mossville, Louisiana, which is right next to a vinyl chloride plant that you can see there in the background. And this is just a reminder of the devastating impacts of the manufacturing of PVC plastic and why we need to move away from it. Next slide. For progress towards goals, 68% of retailers reported reductions in some chemical or plastic of concern. And again, if you look at which chemicals, the highest number of retailers reporting reductions on a specific chemical was PFAS, with 30% reporting reductions there. And then if you look at plastics, 20% reported reductions of polystyrene or expanded polystyrene in plastics, most often packaging. Next slide. And finally, safer solutions, where we need the most work. 80% of retailers do not have a definition for a safer solution, which basically means that they're flying blind. They can be banning chemicals of concern, but if they don't have a direction for where they want to go, then they can end up in that move from PBDE to bromophenol situation, where not only are they continuing to endanger public health, but they are also subject to continued regulation. There's a cost involved every time there's a switch out, of a chemical of concern. And if you are not focused on moving to safer solutions, you're going to have to do that every time there's a new regulation put in place. So actually on the slide that was showing the reduction in PBDEs and the identification of bromophenols, Washington State has now issued a new restriction. We had a restriction on PBDEs. We now have a restriction on organohalogens. So now bromophenols are going to be banned in TVs and electronic casings. So for manufacturers who switch to bromophenols, now they're going to have to move again out of bromophenols. Whereas if you know that you need to move out of a chemical of concern and you have criteria for what a safer chemical is, you can do that once and be done with it. 10 of the retailers actually have identified, 10 or 20% there, have identified criteria for safer alternatives that align with the Washington State definition. The Washington State definition is aligned with Green Screen Benchmark 1 and Chem Forward bans D and E again, and is aligned with the criteria that we use in the retailer report card. So basically you have to be, for it to be a safer solution, you have to not be a chemical of high concern at minimum. You might set the bar higher depending on what kind of product it is. We also see that 16% of retailers have made financial investments in identifying or developing safer solutions. So some of the ways that they've done that were contributing to or participating in Chem Forward's Know Better, Do Better initiative, which is looking to, in beauty and personal care products, identify the ingredients and assess the ingredients according to hazard, and then so that retailers are able to point their suppliers towards safer solutions and also know what they need to restrict. A number of retailers have also contributed to the Safer Chemistry Impact Fund, which funds projects to both assess and move towards safer products. Apple and Target each earned top scores for investing over $1 million towards safer solutions since 2018. Also, many leading retailers are selling private label products that are certified by credible hazard-based certification programs such as US EPA Safer Choice. Amazon, Office Depot, Staples, Target, and Walmart all have private label, safer choice products that they are selling. Next slide. Now I want to show you a little bit about our website, what you can find there. This is what we're going to show here is what you could see for a single retailer. So we've chosen Target. On a single page, you see the name of the retailer at the top. You get their grade, their letter grade, their total score, and their rank of the 50. Look forward. And then you get their high-level scores for each one of the 4 essential elements. Next slide. And then there's a summary of key findings and recommendations for that specific retailer. Next. If you drill down, for each one of the 4 essential elements, you can see the points earned out of the total points, and what % that is. Next. And then each one of the questions that was asked for that element and what the score was for each one of those. Next. And then if you click on points details, you get a write-up of why they got that score and what it is that the retailer is doing. Next. You can also look at how any particular retailer compares to its competitors. We've put together a number of different categories, like Target, because it's a big box store, has a number of different categories of products that they sell. So you can click on any one of those and get all of the other retailers that sell that type of product as well. Next. And finally, we have a grade history. Since the retailer was first evaluated by the chemical footprint, or excuse me, the retailer report card, which again has varied. We began with 11 in 2016 and now have 50. And you can see the history of their grades. Next. I'm handing it back to you, Mike.
Great. Thank you so much, Sherry. So I should note that, with limited time, we're really just scratching the surface here on kind of the findings, trends, analysis. So we strongly encourage folks to take a detailed look at the information that we have on the website at retailreportcard.com, where you can review detailed analysis for all 50 retailers and their subsidiaries, as well as high-level findings and more detailed policy recommendations as well for individual companies and retailers across the board. So in the next few minutes, closing out, want to talk a little bit about high-level recommendations we have and some of our next steps here, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. Again, if folks have questions, we ask that you please put the questions in the Q&A function on the bottom in the Zoom, and we'll take the questions at the end of the presentation. And again, today's webinar is being recorded, and we'll be sharing a copy of everything. So as we've kind of insinuated, we think that the report card can be really valuable for companies to understand both where they're doing well and where there are opportunities for improvement. Individual companies can go to the website to see how they're scored across each one of the 4 essential elements at a high level, and then you can then drill down and see for each one of the 4 essential elements where companies did and didn't get credit, and as Sherry noted, a description of why we awarded points that we did. Additionally, if you're a retailer that was scored in this year's analysis, you should have received in December a detailed spreadsheet for us that has a detailed quantitative analysis that shows where we did and didn't award points for each one of the criteria embedded in the report card. I should mention that if you haven't yet reviewed the criteria, you can download the criteria behind the 4 essential elements on our website at retailreportcard.com in the resources and the methodology section. But this information can be used as a gap analysis for companies to understand, where should they really focus their efforts in the year ahead. If you're a retailer, as we noted, you can actually easily see how competitors in your sector score and understand where they are doing well, which can provide information and potentially inspiration for you as you're trying to figure out, where can your company make improvements in the years ahead. Across the board, as Sherry noted, there are a number of high-scoring retailers that have performed quite well. some of which have performed well consistently, and a few of them are new. So we strongly encourage stakeholders to review those high-scoring retailers. I should mention that this information can not only be valuable for businesses and retailers, but also policymakers in states and at the federal level. There's a lot of information in the scorecard on where companies are making progress on individual uh, classes of chemicals of high concern, high hazard plastics. In fact, we have a couple of tables in the report that quantitatively and visually demonstrate where companies are making progress on chemicals like phthalates and PFAS and plastics like PVC and polystyrene. So this could be a tool that is not only useful for retailers, but also policymakers and regulators in states. For retailers, though, we're more than happy to meet with you in the months and the year ahead to talk with you about the basis of our findings. So please consider us a resource and an open invitation to meet with us to discuss our findings and recommendations. We're happy to meet with you to walk you through the evaluation and talk about why we did or didn't award points across the board. In terms of our own next steps here at Toxic Free Future and the Mine the Store program, there's a lot of information to mine in the report card. So to that end, in the months and the year ahead, we're going to be putting out some additional analysis of the data, looking at really trying to drill down in certain areas where we, essentially didn't have enough time to kind of go as deep as we would like to. So for example, we're looking at doing a follow-up analysis of looking at how are companies making progress on PFAS in their products and packaging and really trying to understand that better. Additionally, as we've heard on today's webinar, safer solutions remains a challenge for most retailers. Most retailers are not doing enough to evaluate the safety of alternatives. So that's another area where we're planning to do some analysis. For those retailers that sell beauty and personal care products, we have some funding available for retailers to work with ChemForward to conduct chemical hazard assessments for a limited number of ingredients in beauty and personal care products, whether that's ingredients in your products currently or potentially alternatives to chemicals that you may consider substituting. So if that's something that you're interested in, if you're interested in having chemical hazard assessments done, get in touch with us or ChemForward and we can share a little more about that opportunity we have to conduct some chemical hazard assessments in the beauty and personal care space. I will note that we are not planning on publishing a scorecard this year. The next iteration of the retail report card will be published sometime probably in later 2026. And that's because we really want to give businesses an opportunity to make improvement and over the year ahead and to really kind of take a close look at our evaluation and think about where can they improve. So we will be sharing more detailed information later this year about that timeline and process for the 2026 scorecard. We are also most likely going to be updating the Ban the Bad priority list of high hazard chemicals and plastics. So if you're not already on our email list, go to our website, retailreportcard.com or talkfreefuture.org, sign up for our email list to make sure you get notified of some of those updates. So that, at this point, concludes the formal presentation for today's webinar. If you're interested in getting in touch with us, here are our email addresses. And again, you can learn a lot more by going to our website at retailerreportcard.com. And with that, we're going to transition and open up the conversation to some Q&A. So if you have any questions, please type your questions in the Q&A section, and we will go through as many as we can in our remaining time. So let's see here. We're getting a couple of questions about safer choice. One question is, what is Toxic Free Future's opinion on the EPA Safer Choice program? Another question on whether or not safer choice only applies to cleaning agents. Maybe I'll pass that one to you, Sherry, see if you want to answer those two.
Sure. So we're strongly supportive of the EPA Safer Choice program. We actually were working along with many other parties to try to get the Safer Choice program expanded to beauty and personal care products this past year, which unfortunately did not happen. But Safer Choice is that rare program that requires that all components of a product be analyzed and assessed as safer. So for that reason, we uh, if a product is Safer Choice certified, then within the retailer report card, we consider that as a safer product. Excuse me. In terms of does it apply only to cleaning products? It does not. It applies to it's all formulated products. And it goes beyond cleaning products. The majority of the products that are covered are cleaning products, but it goes beyond cleaning products. I'm actually not, I don't have the full scope at the top of my tongue, but formulated products beyond cleaning products does not include beauty and personal care.
Yeah, and I would just add, if you go to the EPA Safer Choice program website, you can actually see the different types of product categories that they certify products against, and you can also see the names of the brands and retailers that sell EPA Safer Choice products. So if you went there and you typed in, say, a certain retailer name or a certain brand name, you can see examples of companies that sell those products. We're getting
I
one
will,
question. What's
sorry,
that?
I just give kudos. Amazon wins the prize for having the most private label Safer Choice certified products. Toss that out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that we are seeing some retailers beginning to do is to make it easier for their customers to identify products that sell credible third-party standards. So, for example, Amazon has a climate pledge friendly program where they make it easier for customers to identify products that meet multiple third-party standards, such as Safer Choice, Cradle to Cradle, as well as others, including Made Safe, EWG Verified, and others. And that's, I think, a growing trend that we're seeing, as more and more people are buying products online. We are seeing retailers beginning to improve the functionality of their website so that customers can purchase products that meet credible third-party standards. One question that just came in is, can you please share the link to the Ban the Bad list that you mentioned earlier? Um, Melissa, if you're still with us, if you could put that link in the chat, I greatly appreciate it. And either way, we'll also send a link in the communication that we send out with the slide recording and the PDF of the slides. If you're interested in looking at it more sooner, you can go to retailreportcard.com, and if you click on the both the resources and the methodology section of the report card, you will see the link to the Ban the Bad priority list. And again, we're looking to update the Ban the Bad priority list in the year ahead, so stay tuned because it really just represents, I would say, an entry point for companies to begin. It doesn't represent the entire universe of high hazard chemicals that are out there. We know that there are literally thousands of them, but we think it provides a useful starting place for companies to begin to identify both individual chemicals of concern and classes of chemicals of concern. And since we do include chemical classes like PFAS, phthalates, formaldehyde releasing agents, and others, the Ban the Bad list is in fact made up of more than 10,000 individual chemicals of high concern as a result. So next question, maybe I'll pass it to you, Sherry, and see if you want to tackle this one and I can chime in as well. Has TFF ever offered or has it considered developing model corporate chemical programs such as model legislation or to help facilitate corporate adoption and fulfillment of these goals?
Right. We actually see the rubric itself as acting as a model. And so the rubric is built, we didn't just come up with that out of thin air. We've both Mike and I have been working for 20 years on chemicals policy, but we also have been working with a whole multiple overlapping networks of NGOs, academics, the businesses themselves to identify best in class approaches. So that is what the rubric is based on.
Hmm.
Um, And so what the rubric does is actually just ask the questions, but they're leading questions. They are, do you do this? Because this is what you should be doing. um, and and what we hope to be doing in the next year, or in the coming years, really, is populating the rubric with what actual companies are doing to act as models. So to some degree, if you take the retail report card as a whole right now, and you look at the high scoring companies and the descriptions of what they're doing, like you drill down into each one of those questions, you can get at a model. It's not all combined in one as a model. That's something that will continue to evolve, but that's where we're going in terms of a model. In terms of legislation, this is not exactly something you can legislate. Legislation is more generally about restrictions, identifying safer solutions, but restrictions at this point. So.
Yeah, and I would add that we think that the retail report card does in fact itself, provide information about model corporate chemical programs. If you go to our website and you look at the highest scoring companies, and then you kind of drill down and read through our detailed evaluations of every company, that essentially enables you to see examples of model corporate chemical programs. There are also some model corporate chemical policies that have been developed. For example, our friends at Clean Production Action and BizNGO have developed a model corporate chemical policy, which is available on the BizNGO website. Additionally, Environmental Defense Fund has also developed a model corporate chemical policy for retailers. So those are a few other places where folks can look. In terms of model legislation, a really great resource to understand how are states increasingly managing chemicals and plastics. A really great resource there is the Safer States website. Safer States is a fiscally sponsored project of TFF, and you can go to the Safer States website to see examples of model state policies that have been enacted, such as the Safer Products for Washington program, that we think can serve as a model for other states that are considering legislation. Here's just a quick kind of basic question. Is a report downloadable? Right now, you can download past copies of the report in PDF. We have not put a PDF of this year's scorecard up on the website. You can download a PDF of the executive summary, which includes a fact sheet that highlights the scores for all 50 retailers. That's also available in Spanish on our website. I should mention the press release and executive summary are also available in Spanish. We will eventually have a PDF of a summary of the report available, but that'll likely be later this year. The next question is a little bit more substantive. So the comment was, great presentation. In your experience, what are some of the main roadblocks that retailers face that might restrict their ability to have better scores in terms of safer and more sustainable chemistry initiatives? Economic competition with other retailers is an obvious one, but do you have any insights on some but not so commonly known ones? So again, they're looking at what are roadblocks that retailers face that might restrict their ability to have better scores in terms of safer and more sustainable chemistry. Sherry, do you want to take a first stab, or do you want me to there?
I could take a stab. So one is that transparency is genuinely challenging, particularly around articles. So there we look to Apple actually as an example. Look at Apple's full material disclosure program for how they have managed to set up a program to get information through their supply chain, running all the way through their supply chain. To some degree, I would call it a failure of imagination. If people have blinders on and are like, oh, this is a chemical of concern that we need to eliminate. Oh, now we need to eliminate this one. Now we need to eliminate this one, and don't have the vision for where do we actually want to go to. So define what is a safer alternative. Get out of this loop of the whack-a-mole approach to chemicals of concern. that lack of vision is genuinely a problem, and that is something that we are beginning to see developments on through through efforts like Kim Forward and the Know Better, Do Better initiative, where retailers are coming together in a pre-competitive way to gather information on the ingredients in their products, get those assessed, identify which are the problematic ones, and then begin to move, like assess the ones that haven't been assessed so they know what they're dealing with, and then begin to move towards safer solutions. So there is a genuine issue around transparency, getting that information through the supply chain, having the incentives to be able to move that through the supply chain, and then to have the vision to move towards safer solutions.
Excellent. Let's see. Next question. How does EDHC factor into retail scoring versus CFP? I'm not sure about CFP, but I will say that many companies that are complying with the ZDHC, MRSL, or that have set goals to meet it, or that can show progress in restricting chemicals that are in manufacturing or in products. Those companies do get credit within the retail report card, particularly in the ban the bad section. So there are a number of companies that either say they currently have adopted the ZDHC MRSL, or they're in the process of implementing it, or have made progress in implementing it. Those companies can receive points um, in the retail report card. In terms of how it factors into the CFP, I would encourage you to reach out directly to Clean Production Action to ask them about the CFP. So let's see. Next question is who in the corporate structure owns the job of formulating a toxics policy? Do the larger corporation have a position dedicated to this work? Are there firms that help companies formulate these policies, or is that firm TFF? Does TFF have the bandwidth to help all of the companies that need help? Big questions there. Sherry, do you want to take a stab at that one, or do you want me to?
Sure, I can do that. And this, just checking at the time, this should probably be our last question. We can't provide full consulting services for all 50 retailers, though we are happy to meet with individual retailers to get started. There are definitely consulting firms that are quite good out there that can help with this sort of thing, and we can point you in their direction. And in terms of who it is that develops that, it varies from company to company. Honestly, it depends on how the company is set up. And so it's often within sustainability, but not necessarily. It's also importantly something that cuts across all of the areas of the company, because you're going to have to bring into the picture marketing, the ones that work with your vendors, legal. It cuts across every single section, and you have to actually translate this topic into the language of each one of those programs. So it's definitely a cross-cutting thing, which is often why it's challenging to get started, but it ultimately definitely pays rewards, not only for public health, but also for the bottom line of the company.
I'll just add that we have worked with a number of retailers in providing input into the drafting of their corporate chemical policies. We've provided technical recommendations on companies' restricted substance lists, MRSLs, implementation plans. So we are happy to provide input. We are not a full service consulting organization. And if that is something you are looking for, we can put you in touch with consultants that have worked with other major retailers and brands in this space, including some of the retailers that earned top marks. So we probably have, we have about close to 20 additional questions. Unfortunately, we are out of time. So what I will say is that we will reach out to those that ask questions one-on-one and get back to you over email. Probably, I will say we could do that by the end of next week. So please have a little bit of patience. In the meantime, please visit retailreportcard.com. Get in touch with us if you'd like to discuss anything that we've highlighted here today. And stay tuned for further analysis in the year ahead, as we noted. And fast forward to 2026, we'll be working on the next iteration. As I noted in the beginning, we will be sending out a copy of the slides and the recording. We'll also include a link to a couple of other resources that we discussed. And thanks so much for everyone's great questions and joining. And we're looking forward to advancing bold corporate chemical policies in the year ahead to protect consumers, communities, and workers from hazardous chemicals and plastics, and look forward to working with many of you to achieve that. Thank you so much, all, and have a great day. Take care.